Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Adobe Live. I am Gayatri. I am an experienced designer for XD, which is one of the newer products by Adobe alongside things like Photoshop, Illustrator. Welcome to everyone who's joining us also live on this chat. Today I was thinking about covering a little bit about voice prototype in Adobe XD. And when I say that, what I really mean is speech playback as an option in prototype mode. So a lot of us are familiar with using tapping on screens to interact with them or typing in our responses to interact with screens. But now with the advent of Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, even Microsoft Cortana. There's another option now available to interact with some of these devices through voice. Now, most of us have, I'm sure, one of these devices at home that we use daily. But there are a lot of designers who kind of work behind the scenes to figure out what these experiences might be. All right, so Adobe XD is one of the few apps out there who kind of allow you to do something like this. I believe, announced this as a feature at Adobe Max last year, and we're already approaching our next Adobe Max, which is coming up in just a month in November. This is where Adobe announces all its new features for its apps and things. I know for a fact that the Adobe XD team is heads down working on some of the new features that we're going to be working on. This is actually a really exciting time for not only us as designers on the Adobe team, but for the entire company, because everybody's been working on features all throughout the year, and this is kind of crunch time, and we get to share with the world what is it we've been working on for this last year. Now, there are going to be some interesting updates also for Adobe Voice prototyping in XD, but I'm not going to be able to sneak any of those right now. You're going to have to wait another month for them. But we still have some pretty powerful features in the app today. Before we jump into it, I want to kind of just show you spatially on the app where this lives. So if you go into the prototype mode in the Adobe app frame, this is app frame, in prototype mode, and say you want to wire two artboards. Don't focus on what I have on my canvas up yet. I'm going to go through that in detail in just a second. But just to show you where this really lives, this feature that we're talking about, is if you select any of the screens up here and you decide to use voice to prototype it. Right now, this trigger over here in the right-hand corner is set to voice. Some of you who've used Adobe XD before might have used tap or drag or even the gamepad triggers. But today, like I said, we're going to be talking about Adobe Voice or voice as a trigger to move from screen to screen, display options. One of the other cool things that you can do is, of course, set the command that you want the prototype to recognize to set the transition or the next screen that you'd want it to go to. All right, so the thing that you're looking at in my canvas over here is a XD resource for prototyping for Amazon Alexa. Alexa seems to be the one that's the most popular in voice prototyping and things that people, I'm sure a lot of you also use at home. This is a quick, easy way for you to get started on prototyping for Alexa. Of course, all the default fonts are there. Some of the main screens where you can start designing with are there. Some of the key, say, patterns and components that you would need to create the UI response screens with Alexa would be there. Now, Alexa is slightly easier, I would say, to interact and design for because it's paired screens and tap interactions with voice. I will also in this tutorial kind of be explaining to you how you can prototype for mobile experiences, but also for things like Google Assistant, which doesn't really always come with the screen. One of the designers who worked, before I was preparing for this, I asked one of the designers who has worked heavily on these voice interactions from Adobe XD to give me some tips that I could share with you all today. And she very generously shared some tips with me. So here are some basic tips before you get started on designing with voice. And I also want to give a shout out to Susa, because these are really Susa's tips. Her last name is not Tips, but this is Susa. I just wanted to give her a quick shout out. She doesn't live in California. I'm kind of filling in for her to tell you about Adobe XD voice features, but she's a seasoned designer for designing for voice, and I wanted to share some of her basic tips. So one of the first and most important ones that she told me was about keeping some of your commands short. They're hard to remember, and as you're beginning to prototype for your screens, it can be hard to recall what is the command that you've said. And by command, I mean over here on the right-hand side where you can put in some of the instructions. All right, let me jump back to my presentation over here. Here we go. One of the second tips that Susa was telling me was to remember to talk to your prototypes as early as possible. Don't just put in commands in and hope for the best. I think this kind of holds true for any prototype. Keep testing, going back and forth between the screens that you're designing. And the next thing is test it with users. Sometimes the things that you say to it or sentences that you construct might not be very natural for other people, or that you're so deep into the project that you think are obvious. The fourth tip is to guide your users and make little questions along your prototype that you'd like to ask the users, and ask them what they really expect from the experience. I'm gonna stop there. I have two more tips for you, but before I get to that, I wanna show you how to prototype within the app. Now, let's start with the very basics. How do you even wire two screens up with voice triggers? Now, I'll quickly create two frames over here. And maybe I'll put the prompt for this screen over here. Say next screen, okay? That sits right here in the middle of the screen. And then maybe I'll say here it is. I just want to reveal exactly how you would trigger these two things, and then we'll get into a little bit more complex interactions. All right, so here we go. We go into prototype mode, and you select the screen that you'd like to prototype from. You select this blue little toggle, or you can select one of the objects on the artboard. And as you try to wire it to the next artboard, the options start becoming clear to you on the right-hand side panel. This is where you make the decisions for the command lines and things. So we want to use a voice trigger. So you go in and click voice, and you enter the voice command. So basically, it's this command line that I mentioned here. So it's next screen. And the transition, I think, has already been set to this artboard over here. Okay, let's see. So you go into exactly going back to Susa's tips, test these things yourself, see if they actually work. Go into this play mode over here, and I'm gonna put it right in the center of my screen. And when you are trying to test this, to activate the microphone on your prototype, just hold the space bar on your keyboard down. All right, so here we go. Next screen. Did you see that little transition? It moved to this screen over here. Another thing XD lets you do is have a kind of a feedback along with this interaction. So you see this option over here on the right hand side. It says speech playback. Hold on, let me look at some of the questions over here on the chat. Noor asks, can we get free tickets for Max? I wish, Noor, but I'm sure if you, I'm not going to Max this year, and I would love to. Even within Adobe, we try to make sure we have a interesting mix of creatives at Max. And since you're not you don't work for Adobe right now, I think you might actually be eligible for some competitions or things, or if you work at a company or something, they might be able to help you kind of get some kind of a discount. I would look online and see if you can find some competitions to get free tickets for Max. I'm sure there might be something out there. Look on Twitter for sure. And hi, Richard, where are you from? Also, all those people, those who are tuned into the chat, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you have any questions as I'm going along the way, the chat is the best place to ask me those questions. All right, chugging right along. As I created this interaction earlier. Let me go back to the one that I had earlier. Here we go. I want to have a speech playback on the right-hand side corner over here. And interestingly enough, I didn't realize that we had all these voices. Also, I'm learning some of this speech playback stuff or voice interaction stuff as I'm presenting to you guys, because we don't really use voice just now to do prototyping as part of the XD team, but it's definitely something we all try to kind of mess around with, and this is my opportunity. Hi, Richard from NYC. It must be kind of later in the afternoon for you. It's just noon for us in San Francisco. All right, so maybe I want to use Justin as a voice, and maybe we'll make Justin say exactly what we've written in the second screen, which says here. Maybe he says, here I am. Maybe we change this into here I am. All right, let's see what happens. Let me make sure I have my voice sound turned up a little bit. It's gonna use your default computer speakers to say the command back to you. All right, so holding the spacebar down, next screen.
Here I am.
Oh. Did it not transition to the next screen? Let's give this one more whirl. Transition, speech playback, transition, destination, dissolve. And it says, here I am. I see. Oh, there we go. Let's try it one more time. Next screen. All right, I think I might be doing something wrong over here, but I don't want to wait on this too much because we have only 16 more minutes with you, and I want to share some other resources, and we'll go over this interaction one more time. Now, if you guys are making a prototype for Alexa, XD has already done some of the work for you, and there is a really nice voice UI kit that's available on Behance today for free, from where you can download all the resources that you might need, which I was telling you about earlier, with the screens and the assets that you might need for creating some of these interactions. And I have it pulled up for you right here. All right. As part of the screens, there's also a small interaction that's already created for you. It gives you a little bit of a guideline on how to set it up. As you can see over here, it by default has interaction set up already. So say I hold the space bar down, and one top tip that I'm seeing from some of these prototypes is that they're giving you a hint on what to say down here. So all right, I hold the space bar down. Alexa, open World Travel Guide.
Welcome to World Travel Guide. You can learn more about Cuba, pyramids in Mexico, or Cubban Park. What would you like to hear more about?
Alexa, tell me more about Cuba. Oh,
Enjoy the smell of cigars and the taste of Havana Club rum under the Caribbean sun as you explore Cuba.
All right, so let's see what's kind of going on under the hood over here for this interaction. On the right-hand side, you can see that there's of course that voice trigger that I talked to you about. The command line has been set to Alexa Open World Travel Guide. And then there's a transition set over here and a destination. Once this screen is opened, okay, this is what I was doing wrong earlier. Once the screen is open, you can hit the time trigger, and with 0 seconds delay, there can be an automatic speech playback. So let's try to do this on our own once quickly together. I'm going to copy this artboard over here, make sure it doesn't have any wires attached to it. And I'm going to use this artboard again to make sure I have the assets here. What I'm really interested in is making sure I understand how, and you guys understand how to make this trigger possible. So you wire these things up, you say voice trigger, and over here you say Alexa, open world travel guide. And you hit a transition and it's a dissolve, perfect. Now, on the screen, once it opens the screen, we want it to give us a response back, a speech playback. And for that, I think we set it up to have another screen. Grab one quickly from up there. And hold it back, say that. Once you're here, say time as a trigger, 0 seconds. And have a speech playback and let Joanna say, here are, actually, I can just use the one that they've used over here. Let's copy this and put it up over here. So it says, welcome to World Travel Guide. You can learn about Cuba, da 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 da. What would you like to hear more about? Okay. So I'm just trying to make sure we have that speech playback feature programmed in here. All right, so let's play this back. Alexa, open World Travel Guide.
Welcome to World Travel Guide. You can learn more about Cuba, pyramids in Mexico, or Cubban Park. What would you like to hear more about?
All right, there we go. So this was what I was trying to figure out earlier, having a little bit of a speech playback. And then you can layer this on with a couple of more prototyping options, like you can wire it to the next screen over here and figure out what the transition is. You can have voice, of course, and then figure out what the transition there might be. All right, so we quickly covered a little bit about how you can prototype for Alexa. Now, to make this experience a little bit more realistic, you can also put this prototype into Alexa to test with your customers or just to test out yourself, because sometimes holding a spacebar down in XD might not feel as realistic or into testing. One of the things that you can do to do that is if you go into one of the plugins panel over here on the right hand side, or on the left hand side, the new plugins panel over here. And I believe if you write Alexa in, all right. So there's this plugin over here that automatically allows you to see some of the screens on your actual Alexa device and test the same way you would a prototype in the preview mode of XD. All right. So also, one of the other things that I wanted to tell you about, so if you've created this whole experience that you want to show to people and might not always want to layer this prototype with instructions for your customers or stakeholders or anybody you want to kind of like preview for putting this project on your portfolio, you can definitely record it as a video. So if you go up to the corner to the preview mode over here, and you see this little caret icon in the right-hand side corner. If you drop that down, you can see recording options and voice show notifications. So if I enable the microphone, it will record my voice as well, and I can record an entire demo of this interaction so that I can put it up in my portfolio or send it across as a video for some people to kind of preview and look at how these things interact. The second part over here is called show notifications, and I'll quickly show you what that does. All right, let me close this. So right now our trigger is Alexa, open world travel guide. But if I hold the space bar down and say, Alexa,
Welcome to World Travel Guide.
I
You
guess
can
this
learn more about Cuba,
responds to
pyramids in
Alexa.
Mexico, or Cuban Park. What would you like to hear?
Okay, maybe I think it recognized the first word there. Maybe if I say something else. Google. So you see this little blue bar at the bottom? What it tells you is what it heard. No match for Google. So this is a good response because responsive thing, because it lets you know what is the thing that the prototype actually heard, and you can revise what you're saying to say the actual right thing. So this is a like neat little trick there where it kind of lets you know it heard the wrong thing or didn't hear the right thing. And of course, like I told you, the microphone will also record your voice along with the prototype. All right, so this was enough about Alexa and Amazon plugin. One of the other devices that's pretty popular for voice prototyping is, of course, Google Home, and we couldn't leave it behind. And I really just wanted to show you this prototype because I think it's a very clever way to use screens to create a prototype for something that doesn't really have screens. Like you see here, Google Home is really just a voice device. There's no screen paired up right next to it to know what to really know what options are there for you to select from. So one of the clever things that I like about this prototype is that outside the artboard is actually the hint for what you need to say to activate the next artboard. So this one has already been pre-wired. Let's take a look at the prototype to say, when does my prescription expire? And then when you select that, that's exactly what's there in the commands over there. We've already seen this one-to-one interaction, but one of the other things that you can do with XD is have multiple different commands that also can go to different screens. But in this one, it goes to 3 different kinds of screens. Of course, in this one, there's just one image, but it responds to 3 different sets of instructions. So let's say, let's test this out quickly. It said, when is my next prescription? So if I hold the space bar down, when is my next prescription?
Your prescription expires in 3 days. Would you like me to renew your insulin prescription?
So this is kind of cool. It will activate with any of those 3 variants of, it's really asking the same kind of question, but you can trigger it to recognize different sentence constructions. So this one is really sweet. Like I said, you can use the actual image of the product and still create somewhat of a realistic experience with recording interactions. One of the next ones that I wanted to show you was for mobile devices. And this one is kind of, actually, I think the most common one that someone would use, especially on their phone devices. You don't even have to have a artificial intelligence device specifically dedicated to voice interactions. So over here again, you see there's already a prompt letting you know what you need to say. Because imagine if this prompt didn't exist. I think that's a good UX design tip to have, to like let someone who's going to interact with it, give them a hint on what to really say. All right, so let's see what this interaction really is, and then we'll figure out how it works. So let me hold the space bar down. Find pop music. All right, so looks like I had too many screens open, and for some reason, I lost Adobe for a second. Let me just relaunch my app. One of the other things that I wanted to point out was this amazing tutorial that's there online by Howard Pinksy about designing for voice in Adobe. It's really not long, it's only 4 minutes, but it goes over very nicely and neatly, and you can pause it wherever you need to figure out how to make voice interactions. I'm gonna quickly launch XD again. Oh. There we go. So one of the example that we were going over was this music example over here. All right, so we have it back up again. So let's take a closer look at what's really happening. There was this pulsing interaction that was kind of happening at this stage in the app, and we can go into prototype mode to figure out what's really happening. I bet you there we see, it's like a time interaction over here that goes on to all of the following screens over here, ending up at this very last screen where this screen is showing you the final music screen pulled up over here. All right, so that's kind of all I have about examples to share with you about the different designs that different ways in which you can use voice interaction. Going back to summarizing some of the tips that I think went over, but just to summarize it one last time for you is, of course, if you want to, especially in XD, I think that's a great feature to be able to record your voice over your prototypes, so you can record it as a video and along with the screens, so that you can share with other people what the experience might be, because sharing these prototypes, although they're fairly easy to share as a link, might not be as simple for people to understand the interaction about. So having a video that has your voice over it and records the interaction and the screens might be easier for people to understand about what's going on. And the second thing that I was telling you about was there's a sweet plugin by Amazon in partnership with Amazon Alexa, which lets you take the screens that you've designed in XD and put them on an actual device to test out with your customers or test out with your friends. And it might just actually make for a really sweet portfolio piece as well, to show people that you've actually taken the step to interact with voice prototyping tools. And XD is one of the first tools to actually have a feature like this, and you should definitely try to mess around with it. As you saw just now, it's fairly easy to do. It's really not that hard to pick up, and it just takes a couple of screens to get things up and running. While we're at it again, and we have like 1 more minute to go, I think I could share with you perhaps one more thing that I really liked about this prototype. So let's take a closer look. So one of the things that I see is happening is that over here is that even though, like I said, there were not screens earlier, there is these colors kind of changing in this Google app. So I'm gonna quickly take a look here. Hey Google. There you see. So that's like a cute little interaction that you can also create with multiple time triggers and multiple artboards. So I hope you guys try to mess around with the sound prototyping feature that we have in XD. Follow along, of course, with some of the courses that we have online. And until next time, I'll see you again. Have a good weekend, everyone. All right, bye.